Soulmates, welcome to Fox Soul's Black Report for Friday, December 9th. I'm Courtney Hicks.
And I'm Nicordelai Corte. We are honored to stand behind this desk each day to take you on a journey across Black America and tell you the stories that are impacting our people.
That's right, bringing you our news, our views, and our voice. So let's get with the top headlines for today. A Louisiana college community is mourning the deaths of 3 marching band members who were hit and killed by a semi-truck. Tyran Williams, 19, Broderick Moore, also 19, and Dylan Young, 21, were struck Tuesday evening by a freight liner that drifted onto the northbound shoulder of Interstate 49 North. That's according to Louisiana State Police. The young men who hailed from the Dallas area were changing a tire at the time of a crash. All 3 died at the scene. An investigation into the crash is still ongoing. Toxicology tests for the semi-driver, identified as 62-year-old Clyde Gay, are also pending. He was not injured in the accident. Counseling has been made available to students impacted by the tragedy.
One of the 6 men who's facing weapons charges in connection to the deadly shooting of a St. Louis football star has pleaded guilty. 23-year-old Maurice K. Dickerson of East St. Louis pleaded guilty to aggravated discharge of a firearm in Madison County Circuit Court last week. This Class 1 felony carries a penalty of 4 to 15 years in prison. Jaylon McKenzie, who was 14, died after being hit by a stray bullet on May 4th, 2019, at a home during an after-prom party. Neighbors estimated that 400 to 500 people showed up. A status hearing is set for March 6th, but a sentencing date has not yet been set.
And the former Minneapolis police officer who kneeled on George Floyd's back while another officer kneeled on Floyd's neck is expected to be sentenced to 3.5 years in prison for manslaughter. J. Alexander Quang pleaded guilty in October to a state count of aiding and abetting second-degree manslaughter. The plea came on the same day jury selection was set to begin in his trial. His guilty plea, along with another officer's decision to let a judge decide his fate, averted what would have been the 3rd long and painful trial for Floyd's loved ones. Quang is already serving a federal sentence for violating Floyd's civil rights. Quang has the right to make a statement, but is not known if he will.
In Los Angeles, according to a new report by the Commission on Human Relations, reported hate crimes have risen to their highest level in 19 years. That's a 23% jump from the previous year. According to the report, 786 hate crimes were reported last year. That's up 641 from the prior year, the highest officials in LA have seen since 2002 following the 9/11 attacks. The report also noted that 46% of racially based hate crimes targeted Black residents, although they only make up 9% of the overall population.
And 3 former St. Louis aldermen, including the longtime board president, will go to prison for accepting bribes from a businessman. Now, the sentences handed down this week in federal court ended a 3-year-long investigation. The businessman provided bribes in exchange for tax breaks and a reduced rate in obtaining a city-owned property. Federal officials have not named the businessman, but the St. Louis Post Dispatch reported he is facing his own federal charges. Former Alderman President Lewis Reed was sentenced to nearly 4 years in prison. Former Alderman Jeffrey L. Boyd was sentenced to 3 years in prison, and former Alderman John Collins Muhammad was sentenced to nearly 4 years in prison.
A justice rally is scheduled this weekend for Shanquella Robinson, the 25-year-old woman who was allegedly murdered by her friends while on vacation in Cabo. The event is being led by Robinson's sister, Aquila Long, who discussed with officials what justice would look like to her family. She told reporters, quote, "Everybody being arrested and doing time in Mexico would be part of the justice she seeks." While Shanquilla's family remains hopeful that justice will be served, they've recently shared that the FBI is not keeping them thoroughly updated.
And that's really the sad aspect of this case. We know that that family deserves justice. We know that there was some foul play according to the results of Shanquella's autopsy. However, dealing with another country and their laws and protocol and guidelines don't seem to be meshing with the urgency here in the States to want to get and bring folks who are responsible for her death to justice. And it's just insult to injury, and it's just really heartbreaking for the family that they can't quote unquote hurry this thing along, or at least get pinpoint and get who could be charged for her murder in place. It's really unfortunate.
Yeah, and at the very least, you would think that the FBI, would at least keep the family updated on a regular basis. It's hard enough losing a loved one, let alone losing a loved one so tragically. Somebody who was on vacation with their so-called friends, and they come back, deceased. And so, we'll continue to keep our eye on this story and more.
True.
Moving along, the WNBA star Brittney Griner, she's finally home, resting with her family. The White House says it was one or none when it came to securing the release of the American who was held for months in a Russian penal colony.
WNBA star Brittney Griner has been freed after 9 long months in Russian custody.
This is a day we've worked toward for a long time. We never stopped pushing for her release.
The swap on a tarmac in Abu Dhabi. Griner's release was in exchange for Russian arms dealer Viktor Bout, who was convicted and sentenced to 25 years in prison for a plot to sell arms that would kill Americans. Some critics of the prisoner swap say President Biden let Vladimir Putin get the better deal.
Think about the exchange here. The merchant of death for a WNBA star who was picked up for marijuana. What a victory for Putin. But what else it does, it makes every American who is overseas vulnerable.
Over the summer, there was talk of a deal, Bout for Griner and Marine Paul Whelan, who has been in Russian custody for nearly 4 years. But that never materialized.
There had been people talking about being home by Christmas, and of course that isn't going to happen. So I'm sure he's extremely disappointed.
The Russians just treat Mr. Whelan differently. They put him in a special category, and that makes negotiating over his release through a swap of some kind much more difficult than it was in the case of Brittney Griner.
Griner's wife said while she is focused on Brittney right now, she will remain committed to helping families trying to bring their loved ones home.
And the Black University of Kentucky student who was seen in a viral video being a victim of racism is speaking on the incident and providing an update since that attack. When asked if she's heard from the student since the video went viral, Kyla Springs says she has not heard anything from the girl, not even an apology. Springs says it hurts, but she's not surprised. Sophia Rosing, that you saw there, the white young lady who attacked Spring, pleaded not guilty to the charges against her.
Mayor Tashura Jones of St. Louis has signed an executive order to create a reparations commission for residents. The commission will consist of 9 members who explore and recommend opportunities for reparations in the city. Now, Jones says the commission will explore the history of race based on harms in the city, reveal the present-day manifestations of that history, and propose potential funding resources to address harms. Jones adds that all commission members must live in the city of St. Louis and represent different backgrounds. There will be at least one civil rights advocate, clergy member, attorney, academic, public health professional, and youth member to serve on this commission on a voluntary basis.
And the first Gen Z member of Congress, Maxwell Frost, is looking for new housing after his apartment application was rejected. Now, Frost took to Twitter to address the denial. He wrote, "For those asking, I have bad credit because I ran up a lot of debt running for Congress for a year and a half. Didn't make enough money from Uber itself to pay for my living." Now, many are sympathizing with Frost and says this brings light to the overpriced housing market and the difficulty for blacks to find suitable housing. For those wondering, the median rent for a 1-bedroom apartment, this is in D.C., I can attest to this, and so can the Quarterlight, $2,321 a 1-bedroom. This is according to Zillow.com. Expensive out there.
Staying in D.C. for a moment, a 15-year-old high school student got the shock of a lifetime when he was asked to paint an image for the vice president. Alex Burko of Washington, D.C. is a 10th grader at Duke Ellington School of Arts when his teacher asked him to reimagine the home in a wintry setting, leaving out one little detail. The image was being submitted to a secret design contest where they would be featured on the second family's annual holiday card. The winning design depicts one observatory circle inside a snow globe, resting on a wooden table with decorative pine cones, leaves, and red berries. Burko and his family were invited to visit with Harris and her husband Doug Imhoff's home to celebrate the win and hand deliver a signed copy of his printed holiday card. They also took home an ornament inspired by the design.
Very nice. All right, there's a group of folks taking street smarts into the classroom. We've reported too many stories about violence escalating between young black boys and girls, sometimes ending deadly, but it doesn't need to come to gunfire. Now, the group New Era Detroit has come up with a plan that could curb the violence. Fox 2's Randy Wembley with more on this particular program.
Real men keep their composure. Real men keep their composure.
If it's easier to build strong children than to repair broken men, then New Era Detroit is getting into the construction business. The grassroots community organizing group is zeroing in on kids with its conflict resolution program, hoping to give them the tools they need to squelch squabbles before they escalate into beefs and bloodshed.
To see kids, children out here being so reckless, we have to and really program them to understand that, consequences first and foremost, and then understanding composure.
New Era Detroit spent a day working with students at John R. King Academy recently. Its founder, Zeke Williams, says conflict resolution will be one of their top priorities over the next decade.
One of the biggest problems in our community is wanting a quick answer, a quick fix, a quick way out. And the reality is there's no quick fix. It took decades upon decades for us to be in the situation that we're in now. So it's going to take time to get us up out of that situation.
And technology is a part of it. Police, psychologists, and activists alike have all noted the role social media often plays in spats that can turn into violence. The kind of violence that took the lives of 14-year-old Joseph Nankervis.
He just had the biggest smile. He was the baby of our family.
And 15-year-old Robert Harris.
The boy that shot my son, he's 15 years old. Same age as my son. Didn't want to throw at these, but you picked up a gun.
The energy that you put out is the energy that you get back. I want y'all to repeat after me.
New Era says it's already working with several schools in Detroit and is eager to partner with DPSCD to implement programs throughout the district. Even so, Zeke says they and other stakeholders can only do so much because the real work starts at home.
Parents, we really have to look ourselves in the mirror and say, I have to do more so that my son, my daughter can grow up with a better mindset and a better mentality so that we won't be seeing these stories on the news where a 13 or 14-year-old just robbed somebody or a 16-year-old just did a mass shooting.
Our thanks to Randy for that. New Era Detroit says this is just one way they provide organizational structure of black communities. And I think it's a great program. I just saw a viral video of an after-school fight, and it began, unfortunately, with them, fist to fist. And then one young person pulled out a gun. That young man, this happened in the D.C. area, was shot. It wasn't life-threatening, but just the whole, idea that this is what our young people are involved with. This is the recourse that they take. And I mean, this was a group of students. Of course, they all had their cell phones out. And it was just so disturbing. As a matter of fact, IG flagged it as one of those, videos that could be disturbing to watch. So
yeah,
It's ongoing. It's a problem, and we appreciate this group here in Detroit trying to make some headway.
And I really appreciate just sort of the recognition that the epidemic of gun violence that we see in this country, it didn't just happen overnight.
Right.
And therefore, the solutions to this epidemic in gun violence aren't going to be solved overnight, as was mentioned in the package. And I just really love the fact that this organization, New Era Detroit, is empowering youth with the tools, alternatives to gun violence. Conflict resolution, is incredibly important. And to empower youth with the tools to be able to do that as an alternative to picking up a gun or laying hands on somebody.
Right.
I think that's a step in the right direction.
I agree. All right, still ahead, the push to curb gun violence in the Black community.
Yep, that's right. What one group in Memphis is doing to ensure that our communities are safe. You're watching Fox Soul's Black Report.